Hey friends, it's Sarah, the host of the Home for Humanity podcast. This interview is with Larisa Noonan. Larisa helps people discover their inner witchy healer, or the part of them that brings gifts to the world through connection with nature. How she helps people discover that and the blocks to becoming that, despite having an upbringing or a previous belief system in fundamentalist Christianity, or just fundamentalism in general, that black and white binary thinking, right and wrong, and that belief system of positioning me versus the other. And it's not just Christianity or religion, but that's where a lot of it comes from, and especially in her work and mine. Her and I share that. Actually, we have that in common, the growing up in the fundamentalist belief system and discovering that our gifts and talents are actually much more here on earth. And I guess I'll speak for myself, as I had to discover why my love for this earth and this realm was actually a gift, not a curse, because I was taught to transcend and to find safety in spirit and to be closed off. And actually this realm rocks. And so I get off on tangents in this conversation about real estate and housing, and how we can really how we can create better housing and ways of living with each other by breaking down this fundamentalist thinking that actually prevents us from that deeper connection with each other and the natural environment around us. And that goes for our neighborhoods and housing developments as well. So we really go all over the place in this conversation. It's pretty tender. It's a deep talk for me. I kind of mentioned I at the beginning, like, there was something before this talk that I kind of didn't want to have, because my roots are in this conversation, and it's a bit vulnerable for me to share, but I hope it brings some light to your life, and that if anything resonates for you, please drop it in the comments. I mentioned, and I'll say again, that I first learned about Larisa through the work of Tad Hargrave, Marketing Through Hippies, and hearing how someone like her was even putting this marketing plan together to connect with people like this, people like me, and how to bridge issues that even like this conversation, the wounds that this conversation led to, which they're not necessarily wounds. Listen to the whole conversation to understand that reference. And also our connection to nature connection work. I live really close to wilderness school here in Washington. She lives close to one as well, that we share lineage in that way too. And she's just a really fabulous person. I will put all the links to her work in the description below. Please make sure to check them out and continue along this journey with me for having conversations with people who know about feeling at home in our bodies, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our planet, in this realm. And and I hope you can see the humanity in me in this moment of really appreciating the opportunity to have conversations like this and to share them, and to not waste this opportunity as a realtor to demand more than just monetary equity for the way we build homes and live with each other. But there's plenty of rabbit holes in this conversation. I won't go into one right now. Enjoy this interview, and let me know what you think. Follow along for more. Hope to see you next time. Hi there. This is the Home for Humanity podcast, and I'm here today with Larisa Noonan. I first came across her work, I think, through Tad Hargrave and through Marketing for Hippies, and then coming across this website that said, discover your witchy healer through your inner fundamentalist. And it was like, or like I want you to break down kind of like how those, like the witchy healer and the fundamentalist Christian archetypes came together, and why you had to go get marketing help to do it, and how that's tied to who you are. That's a lot. And I maybe just want to ask, with how are you today? And how connected is who you are to your business? How did that come to be?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm really good today. A little tired. My son was up coughing in the middle of the night, and then there were, a lot of fireworks happening as I was going to sleep. But I'm feeling really good otherwise. And my work I guess I would say it is who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it definitely, my journey is mirrored in my work. It's definitely a 1-to-1 ratio, if that makes sense.
It does, and it seems that way. And that's maybe why I asked such a huge question at the start. Like,
Yes.
this is a very personal business model and structure and message that you're putting out there. It seems
Yes.
like
Yeah.
it.
Yes. It is a really big question. Let me think about where to start. I guess, it comes out of the fact that I consider myself a witchy healer, and it took a while to become comfortable with that, with calling myself that, with identifying myself as that. That's a whole kind of journey and story in and of itself. But I am a witchy healer who comes from a fundamentalist evangelical Christian background. And my family have been part of that particular church and religion for generations. And within that framework, there really isn't much space, or what the work that I'm doing in some ways would be considered very sinful, and I would be on the way to hell essentially for the work that I'm doing. And so arriving here from there has been my journey, and it continues to be my journey. And it's also the journey that I help others along.
How did you go from realizing that's the path that you were on yourself to helping others? Like, where was the fork in the road where you were like, "Oh, I have to help others"? Was there like a pattern recognition somewhere in there of like realizing, "Oh, I'm not alone. There's a lot of us out there feeling this way."
Yeah, a bit. And actually, a lot of that came through my work with Tad. At the time that I encountered Tad, I had been doing energetic healing work and body work for probably 2 decades. And I had been working with ancestral healing, which we haven't talked about that yet, but I've been working with my ancestors within an animist framework for about a decade, an additional decade, or within those first 2 decades. So we're still talking about the same 2 decades. And I was doing a lot of work. My main focus at that time was ritual and ancestral healing. And a lot of my clients who I was working with were coming from some form of religious background, and that kept showing up in our work together and in the work with their ancestors, like those patterns of fundamentalism, of that really rigid way of viewing self and other in the world, that really black, white, good, bad, right, wrong patterns just kept showing up. And as I was working with Tad, I was in his mentorship program. He doesn't offer this particular version anymore, but there were about 12 of us who were doing kind of in-depth work with him around our point of view. And he has all these worksheets with all these questions, and you spend hours answering these questions, and then he goes through them and he starts to like see the patterns within them. And at one point, he noticed me talking about my clients and their religious background, and I had said somewhere else that that is my background. And he just asked, like, what percentage would you say of your clients right now come from some sort of fundamentalist background? And I realized that it was about 80% at that point. And he's like, well, how would you like that to be kind of what you're known for and the work that you go into more deeply? And that was actually how it came about. It came from having someone with a lot of wisdom and a way of seeing patterns, being able to see that in me, because I wasn't really seeing it myself. I knew it was of interest to me. I knew I really enjoyed working with clients around those patterns, but I didn't at that point have the courage to say, this is what I do and this is who I serve, because it felt really daunting and scary to claim that I work with these patterns of fundamentalism, and that, I do it through these avenues of ancestral healing and now shadow work and ritual.
So you were doing those things with people before you started to call it like, yes, we are working on fundamentalist roots that we are bringing to light. I mean, that's what the ancestral work is, right? And the shadow work, that's what you were doing. And now the message that you're putting out there is like, oh, this is who we're calling in. It sounds like the shift.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. I was doing all that work. I didn't really have it, I guess, niche down
Mhm.
to specify that that's what I was doing, but that was what I was doing, and then I was finally able to recognize it and put a name to it.
Hmm.
And so the shift was actually seeing it or having it seen in me, and then being able to name it, even though I had been doing that for a long time. But it took a while to name it and to, yeah, and to just feel comfortable saying, this is what I do, and this is who I am, and this is who I serve.
I was noticing before this morning and like forgetting to send the Zoom link or something and kind of realizing like how badly do I want to have this conversation? I have been curious for a long time about this topic, and I resonate so deeply with someone who grew up as a fundamentalist Christian, shut down huge parts of myself to become that and excel at it, and then fall away completely into a very witchy identity, and then kind of see the shadow side of that and kind of look back as like the other side. I like found the other side of the monster, and it was like, what's the it was like the same side, other side of the same coin, with like the ideology. And I think hearing you describe what fundamentalism is that same thing, um of
Yeah,
thinking there is no, this is not the right way. Like everyone, I was the super Christian who hated the witches, and then I was the witch who hated the Christians. And it's that
exactly.
like, can I just like step out? And I feel like that's kind of in the mode or feeling I'm in at this point in my life, is like I've stepped out, um and it's hard, and I don't know how to talk about it. And maybe that's kind of the feeling I have of like, how do I talk about this with somebody who, um you see it in other people. And so what is the pattern that you've seen in other people that actually blocks them from achieving something in their lives? Because I kind of just, I'm like in this whirlwind, where I'm like, is it everywhere? Is it entirely who I am? Because that's where I came from, and that's what my whole life has been, is just like in this whirlwind of fundamentalism of like, is there any structure or model or belief system where this isn't? Like, how do I practice something true? Um,
Mm.
ah,
Oh, that's such a good question. And there's, oh, I'm just like having so many thoughts as you're speaking there. Let's see where this actually goes. We might just spend the next entire like hour just diving into this question here because it's
great.
so big. Yeah. Let's start with that question. Like, let me just maybe share a little bit about how I view fundamentalism.
Okay.
Because I see fundamentalism, I separate it out from religion. Mostly, it's often tied to religion. But I see fundamentalism as something that does exist everywhere. It's a pattern that arises out of unresolved trauma that leads to wanting to control others, to control ourselves, to control the world to whatever extent we can, in order to feel safe, in order to feel as if we belong, in order and so that we can mitigate those feelings of helplessness and powerlessness that unresolved trauma tends to evoke within us. And so what this means in actuality is that whenever we become afraid, something happens, whether it's a threat happens, whether it's perceived, whether it's real, whether it's something from the past that's being activated within us, and we enter some sort of fear state or some sort of freeze or flight or fight state, the pattern that we automatically go to is one of seeing others as bad and us as good, or perhaps us as bad and others as good, but that split, we go into that split, that black and white view of the world. And it can take a lot of different forms. There's that like inferiority, superiority, which would be the bad, good thing again. There's the you're right, I'm wrong, which if it's that way, then we end up, if we're the ones that are wrong, we find ourselves often trying to do whatever we can to please the other person, perhaps, to make amends. We try to comply if we're really in this more fundamentalist state. If we feel like we're right and they're wrong, then we are justified in all forms of persecution in order to convince the other person of our rightness and their wrongness. And this plays out everywhere. It's not just in religion. Like you were saying, like you were finding these patterns within yourself as a witch. You're like, I'm the good person. I'm going to put my words on this. I'm the good person. I'm the one who has it figured out. I'm the right one. Everyone else should become like an earth honoring witch and like do the things that I do. And if they don't, then clearly, they're inferior. They're not a great person. I don't want to be friends with them, perhaps, or I need to convince them to come into my way of seeing the world. And so we see this in politics. We see this around medical choices. We see this everywhere.
I
And
hear
to,
you.
turn it a little bit towards your question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I kind of spoke over you. I didn't mean to do that. I see it in nature
Okay.
connection sometimes, like the way people connect with certain animals or certain plants. They're like, I just wish I could convince everyone to see the world this way. And it just like
Yes.
rings in my ear as like everyone like this way, everyone. So
Yes. Yes. Exactly. So I mean, I'm hearing you say that you recognize it both. You're hearing the words, but I'm guessing you feel that in your body too. Like for me, when I encounter these patterns, I feel this like rigidity within myself, whether it's coming from someone else. And then if it's coming from someone else, it tends to like evoke that rigidity within me so that I get to like play within my own self with that again. Um, this is kind of a side note, but just as a side note, it's often much easier to see in others than it is to see in ourselves. So, stepping back into your question of, am I just always going to be playing out these patterns over and over? Kind of,
yeah.
kind of, until we become so familiar with them that we don't anymore. And there's definitely ways to that feels really not so great. It's also not true. It's true and not true that we will keep playing these patterns out. We will until we recognize them. We will until we no longer need them.
When you say rigidity, do you mean like that like upright righteousness, or like that sense of like I'm gonna hold on um to to something? Is it like a guarding?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of all of that. If I tune into it right now, like I have this, it's a sense of having to hold myself together very tightly on the inside, or I might fall apart if I don't.
Yeah.
And then this fear of like that I might fall apart. I'm not necessarily conscious of that in the moment that these are happening, but then I start needing to convince others of my rightness. So this comes into my relationship with my husband all the time. Like so often when we argue, it's coming from this place of I'm right, you're wrong, and you need to be able to see things from my point of view so that I can feel safe, so that I can feel seen, so that I know that you love me. Like there's this kind of tying together of agreement equals love, agreement equals connection. And and so if that's not happening, I need to convince him that I'm right and he's wrong, and maybe like see him thrown into the pits of shame for a moment so that I know that he's really had like this experience where he's like seeing my rightness, so that I can again like know that he actually loves me. And it does not work. It does not work in relationships. Playing out the patterns playing out in that way. I feel like I've kind of like lost the thread of where we were going.
No, that's okay. I
Maybe
have
you
a
can
new
help me
thread.
out.
Can I pick up a new thread?
Okay, great.
With
Yes.
I once had a teacher who said like the best way to practice embodiment is to practice healthy relationships. And I'm wondering if
Mm.
like the antidote to that like rigid tension and like feeling like I need to know that I'm right, because there is um in my relationship with my husband, I have noticed like there's I yearn for agreement. I like that you said like that agreement is love. Like if we're
Mhm.
both on the same page, um and that feeling of not being on the same page is an uncomfortable one, but is like sitting in it, the like sitting in that mystery, the antidote to that, because there's this thing that has come up this past couple years has been challenging. COVID was not great for marriage, and for mine anyway. And it there's this mantra that has come up and for the past year at least in my head of I my commitment or my agreement is to remember that you are a mystery and that what we are is a mystery, and that I don't have to know. I don't have to like know or have a sense of right. Maybe that sense of right isn't, I don't have to know what we're doing or where we're going or like what this is. All I have to trust is that there's love here, and that
Mhm.
faith is way more of a felt thing than it is an agreement on paper or a ring on my hand or like a plan, a 5-year plan.
Mhm.
I don't like it has terrified me to like look back and be like, wow, that was not where I wanted to go. um and I think I'm just afraid of that happening over and over, but I think that's what life is. And I think, do you think that like the antidote to that rigidity, like what is that to you? Is there a giving in to the mystery element?
I think that that's a super powerful antidote for sure. And there's different kind of my more cognitive antidotes, like well, like doing the work of Byron Katie, for instance. Like if you have like a thought, like he's a bad person for doing X or whatever, taking that into some cognitive process, like the work of Byron Katie. Like, is that true? Can I absolutely know that that is true? How do I respond when I believe that thought? How might I respond if I never had that thought again in my entire life? And then doing the reverse, the counters to that original thought, which would be like, you know, I'm a bad person for X, finding all these reversals. And a process like that can be really useful to just start like becoming aware of the thoughts that we're holding that might be driving the feelings. Also holding lightly, or holding the perspective of, I think that this is true and I might be wrong. Like with all of the things that we think that we believe and that we hold so closely to ourselves. And when I was starting to talk a little bit before about how it's easier to see fundamentalism in others than in ourselves, because we just think that the way we see the world is right. And maybe our perspective on the world has changed, but then we tend to think that the new way that we see the world is right and is the way. And this isn't necessarily conscious. And we tend to not question these things that are really close to us. And the things that are closest to us that we believe the strongest are the things that when questioned, we feel threatened and we feel the need to defend or to attack or to convince others or to evangelize, to convert, to go into more of that terminology. Yeah. How is that landing so far?
Oh, I'm just thinking about my my desire in housing and real estate as a new realtor. And one of the reasons I call this interview series Home for Humanity is because I am interested in how to house people in a humane way at every level that people need housing, which
Yeah.
is every single economic strata that we live in. That's all of us. And sometimes I get latched on to the idea that we should be living in a certain way,
Yeah.
here on earth, in order to be in good communion with the natural world. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like, there is good stewardship of our natural environments, and there is bad stewardship.
Yes.
And I come down to that. I'm like, oh, wow, we've destroyed this landscape. That's bad. Or, wow, look at the work that this, I just read like one couple in South America. I don't want to say the wrong country. Like owned 100 acres and planted thousands of trees over the time that they lived there, and like totally regenerated this valley. I mean, like, it was like just all dust or dirt, and like they just brought life back to it in the soil. And I'm like, wow, that's good. So there is this inherent, like, don't do that. That makes our land inhospitable. Or yes, do this brings life. But then I think, well, the world, I think about the world a lot as an archetype. Like, it's like, why even think that like that good and bad is even a thing? Because what if the bigger body, the one that's many layers beyond mine, the biggest body, what if that has a design or a health that makes this not good and bad, but actually I don't know, something else? And so I guess
But
that's part of where I
you're
am.
pointing
Like,
to, yeah,
go ahead.
you're actually pointing to what I see as kind of the biggest antidote, and that is the ability to hold like good and bad at the same time.
Oh.
Like,
Damn it.
but that's what you're speaking to. Like, I mean, I hear you describing that beautifully as you describe the earth, and how, like, I mean, the earth is holding beauty and pain all at the same time. And
Mhm.
we are manifestations of the earth as well. Like, our bodies are of the earth. We are water. We are carbon. We are all of it. And can we also hold that within ourselves? And when we are able to, then we don't strike out at others out of fear. It is possible to look around us and be like, I prefer this, without judging that as bad.
Yeah.
It
And
is possible to like look at, go ahead. Yeah.
oh, I was just gonna
I want to hear what you had to say.
add a let the like, and to do it within policy, like to bring all those layers back, because I think that's where my I don't know, I actually started to wonder, like, wow, what is this pattern that I have of just like immediately going to that upper level? And I think there's that transcendent root deep within me of like that, I don't know if it's spiritual bypassing, just to immediately go, it's like, well, no, maybe
Yeah.
none of this matters. um
Yeah,
but I
I'm kind of
want,
talking about the opposite of that,
yeah,
about like coming into the body to feel it,
yeah,
not going up mentally, because that, again, that's another one of those fundamentalist patterns where we believe that spirit and matter are spirit is good, matter, the body, the earth, is like not as valuable. And so what we really want to do is we want to be uniting it all through the body. And that means feeling. That means when I'm in that place, say with my husband, and we're having a fight, and I want so badly to convince him of my rightness so that we can be okay again, to be able to feel that fear in my body, and to, like, shake or let it move through, or cry, or whatever is necessary, instead of going into this place of like rigidity and trying to convince him. And that's mostly coming from the mind, because I'm not in my body. Because if I'm in my body, then I'm going to have to feel all that fear that is in my body. Like, I'm so that, that's generally like, a fear that he's going to like leave me, or he doesn't love me. And so I have to convince him that I'm right, he can love me, which is so fucked up. It does not work. um, but if I can drop into my body and I can feel that fear, and I can like find some loosening around, well, like, this is the way I see things, and maybe I'm wrong. Or when I can actually feel it, then I don't even have to do the cognitive stuff. I can often just come to a place as it passes through or moves through me, to just my own inner safety again, my own connection to my body, to the earth, to those who guide me in the unseen realms, which then allows me to extend curiosity and generosity towards him.
Mm.
and be like, actually, like, who are you? What are you actually feeling and experiencing? Where is your perspective coming from? And it leads to a completely different experience.
And that kind of goes back to remembering the mystery of the relationship for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
if
Yes.
that is my only commitment, I will, it is a fount of newness, because it's constantly
Yeah.
unfolding. Um, going
Yes.
back, yeah.
And is it possible? Oh, sorry.
No,
I just wanted to add one more thing here. Is it possible for me to stand fully in what I believe while allowing someone else to stand fully in what they believe, even if it's the opposite of what I believe, and not see them as bad? And I feel like that's a big part of the path forward, and something that, especially for those of us from fundamentalist backgrounds, can feel completely ungrokkable. That's just to use a weird word.
I am following exactly. Yes, it's
Awesome.
incomprehensible that, I mean, and for whatever reason, I'm translating this in my mind because I'm still kind of stuck on housing policy because I kind of went on that tangent,
It's
and it's
great. It's
still that
great.
it's still that thread is still like right here in my mind because I find that in a lot of the way that like housing and government policy and city councils and local politics and yeah, like you said, you see this in politics a lot because that's kind of the name of the game, I guess, to win votes.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like city planning and the way we live, um any kind of adaptation to the way we house ourselves and our neighborhoods and the way we live amongst each other seems to spark that in people. And it is like this lizard brain of like, it's kind of like this phrase like not in my town, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah, that's fine, but over there. And how is tolerance a part of that? Like, not,
I
oh
I
no.
think we can get into trouble with tolerance. I was
Okay.
actually, this is kind of funny. I was reading, there was someone had posted something on the internet, and I was reading a comment, and it was kind of a divisive post. I don't even remember what it was. It doesn't even really matter. But one of the comments was something about how, in order to actually allow for tolerance to flourish, we have to be intolerant to those who aren't tolerant. We have to be intolerant to those who aren't. And I'm like, whoa, 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 wait. That's really like some really distorted thinking in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Repeat your question, please. I just
Oh, I don't
got
even.
caught up in that and forgot where I was going.
Oh, I don't know why the word tolerant even came up in my mind. Like, is
Okay.
that a part of um needing to be okay with people who live differently than you, in front of your very eyes? Like, can you live among people who live differently, believe differently, act differently, speak differently?
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
tolerance a value aspect of that?
I think tolerance is not strong enough. I kind of feel that we need to go beyond tolerance to like celebrating. Can we celebrate
Mm,
being around people who have very different worldviews than we do, who maybe, hold beliefs that are directly counter to ours? And can we find those places within ourselves where we actually hold those beliefs that they believe? Because we are all the same. Like, we all, if I look deeply enough in myself, the very beliefs that I find abhorrent in others or actions, I can find that in myself. And so instead of denying that or repressing that in myself, can I use it as a mirror to recognize that and to see that within myself and to actually offer love to that place within me, which then allows me to be generous in my love and viewing of the people who are external to me, who are more directly expressing that particular something, to be very vague.
yeah, I like that though, because like tolerance also to me brings up this flavor of like, well, isn't that how we got abused in the first place? Is like being tolerant of something that you kind of just let be over there, there's no connection to it. You just allow it to go do its thing.
Yeah.
And that's like where my fight response comes up. It's like, I don't want to be this bystander to war. I would rather insert myself into it and do something about it. But then I'm like, well, is that the same thing? Am I then like doing the same? Am I seeking the very thing that I'm going to put out? And I think that's kind of that loop logic of
Yeah.
what that person was saying. My teacher, really good mentor of mine, Paul Linden, used to say the best thing that came out of the 60s was the phrase, fighting for peace is like fucking for chastity. It's just like you're just perpetuating the cycle. It's so human, it feels like, though. It's just that kind of goes back to my first question. How do I not do this? How do I
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that the first step is always awareness, to begin to build awareness of these patterns. For me, and again, since it's easier to recognize in others, that's one way to begin to just like become more conscious of how it's playing out in the world around us, this pattern, how it's just everywhere. Also noticing examples of when, say, to use a not supercharged example, say someone's a vegan and they're completely okay with you not being a vegan. Like, this is what I believe. I believe that I should not eat animals. If you're going to eat animals, that's fine. Or like me, like, I eat animals and I'm like, you don't want to eat animals? Great. Just because even like food choices, not even, but food choices can be highly charged and highly polarized. And you're a horrible, horrible person if you are eating meat or you're not eating meat, depending which camp you're in. And so beginning to recognize this at play in the world around us, beginning to recognize like how your nervous system, how your body feels when it sees it, when it recognizes it, which will then start helping you recognize when it's playing out through you as well. Because it's the same. When we see it externally to us, it will bring up feelings in our bodies. And then when we're playing it out, those same feelings will be present within us. So it's just beginning to build awareness. And that is, if we don't want to keep repeating these patterns, it's important to start recognizing when they're actually at play within us. So that's one piece. Another piece is, like, I really believe that fundamentalism it's not just a personal problem. It's something that has been part of our culture for generations. And especially for those of us who grew up in fundamentalist homes, it's been very embedded within our lineages for generations. And so doing that work of ancestral healing to begin to resolve these patterns within our lines makes it much easier for us to do the work within ourselves. And then third, this is something that I'm moving more and more into, because I've been kind of really focused on the trauma aspect of it and learning how to regulate the nervous system and more the trauma resolution approaches to it. And I'm kind of wanting to move a little bit away from seeing this as like wounds and in need of healing, and more into like all of this is super high sensation. So, for instance, when my husband and I are fighting and I'm in this place of needing just to keep bringing it down to like the micro level, because if we can work with it on that level, it allows us to work on many other levels as well. But it's, my body is flooded with sensation. There's that like rigidity, there's that fear, that's that, a lot of it is so intense that I'm wanting to like leave my body and just be from here up and like just be fighting from this place of just trying to convince him mentally. And when our nervous systems are activated, whether it's from threat or whether it's from something really good happening, like that's the high sensation event. And so what if I can just be working with these things as high sensations that I can, with time and with tools, increase my capacity to feel and to stay embodied with, versus as something wrong with me that needs to be healed, or some wound that needs to be healed again. So I'm kind of liking to move a little bit away from we are all broken and we have all these wounds that need to be healed, and more into life is just fucking full of sensation, and how can we expand our capacity to hold and to allow the sensations to maybe move through us in a good way and to stay present with them. It feels a little bit more exciting to me to
Yeah.
approach it from that perspective right now, after spending like 25 years on the like trauma side of things.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. I have a few different things. For I guess
Great.
first one is that gratitude maybe is like this like internal antidote to like the celebrating how others are living. Seems like just that gratitude for something that even, because like fake meat, I don't like fake meat, but the vegans who really like it, I'm glad that they have better options than they did 10 years ago. I'm glad that they get to taste tastier things. I thought about that recently and I'm like, wow, I never thought I would celebrate fake meat, but being able to see it from that way, I'm like,
Mhm.
I can accept that it's a part of life a little better now. I don't know why I had this thing about it before. I worked in a health food store where I just like, I got to try all these different things. I'm like, wow, it's gotten better. And gratitude seems just like such a beautiful, all-encompassing antidote. I was kind of meaning it on the internal level, but even on the social level, maybe that's what celebrating
Mhm.
the way others walk. I want to celebrate that too, and maybe gratitude is the root of that. But
Mhm.
um that was the first. The second thing, what was the last thing you said?
Talking about high sensation.
Oh, I am so fascinated about how to teach this to young people, because you said it is
Mm.
a more exciting way of viewing it, and I think I mean, just from working with kids more, especially outdoor education, working with them outside, trying to get them connected to nature. A lot of them who already are, by 10 years old have their own language with nature by then. And I'm just kind of like, it seems quite accurate as well to just, I don't think it is inherently from wounds. I think it's very human to just be highly sensitive. And obviously it's different for different people, and maybe shutting down is part of where the wounds come from. I think in my I like part of my journey is acknowledging that I like the safety of the shutdown.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
safe and it has worked in protecting me very well, and it is very comfortable
Absolutely.
even as an almost 31-year-old. Like I so maybe it's not, I don't know, it's like not a wound, and I still yearn for that like opening to the sensation sometimes, um because I see it as a very human thing to watch
Mhm.
young people do it, and being, I don't know, are you following what I'm saying? Like the
Yeah.
how
So
do
you,
I, yeah, maybe, I guess my question, okay, sorry, my question is, how do I teach them to harness that, um and maybe as someone who is also very sensitive but in a more reserved way. Does that make sense?
yeah. I think that the kids who are doing nature connection today definitely are going to have an easier time in some ways with this, because there is already that focus, at least from what I've seen, and like really being in the senses and learning to trust what your body is feeling. Like if you're, wandering through the woods or something, like I'm seeing that that's kind of built in a way. And so I could be wrong with this, but I'm kind of hearing your question more like, how do I, as an adult who learned to shut down, open back up? Is that accurate, or are you actually wanting to teach children how to more consciously be able to expand into these states of high sensation and not shut down?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I think I sometimes I am nervous that like what if I inadvertently shut them down in a way that they should be opening up, or what if my own blocks are, I have other teachers who love the fact that who they are is spread throughout all their students, hundreds and thousands of them, through their mentorship, and they love that aspect of mentorship, how they are just part of this weaving, and there is a block for me in that precise thing of but but I don't want this relationship to be what I teach. I want this new way of teaching to be what I teach. So yeah, maybe the answer is both.
Mhm.
And if that's even, I mean, I've wondered if that's even an ethical thing. I had one teacher who was like, "Don't do your teaching until you've done your healing work." And then,
Mhm.
um, so can I heal alongside the students that I'm teaching?
I kind of would take an opposite stance to your other teacher in that we can't heal without others. And I'm guessing that just being in the presence of your children and seeing some of them be totally okay with sensation is healing for you. And I mean, I'm definitely hearing that it's opening you to a desire to be able to do that more. And we heal in relationship and we heal in community. And that's something that I have become more and more leery of within the whole like self-help, self-healing, self-growth communities or just landscape. Is so much of it is focused on the individual and you have to do your healing, and then once you're healed then maybe you can go out and help others, but it's a pretty lonely journey. And if you're not doing it, or the tools that you're using aren't working, it's not the fault of the tools. It's like because there's something wrong with you, like you're broken, or that's the way that it can feel even if it's not like consciously stated. And I don't think that that is really the way we heal, like at our altars by ourselves, or through listening to podcasts, or just trying to like learn to self-soothe. We co-regulate, and when we co-regulate, our nervous systems are able to relax, which allows for healing to just naturally happen. And so that's kind of a little bit of a side tangent, but just to say, I think that it's completely okay to be on a healing journey as you're helping others. I'm going to be on a healing journey for my entire life and probably lifetimes. And if I were to say I can't offer what I've already learned to others, then I'm not serving.
Yeah, then you're not sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will never reach, well, I guess I could attain a state of fully united will and being able to like hold everything all at once, which is to me what healing is being able to be in that state where like everything can be held within me and integrated in some way. Or maybe not, where I have choice to be able to, if I'm standing at a crossroads, to go left or right, north or south, east, right. There's not really a crossroads of left, right, north, south, but there is for me right now,
Yeah, well,
where
there's
I have choice around it.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so for one, I think you're completely okay. My opinion. I give you full permission to be helping others as you're continuing to heal yourself. And then for two, you're going back to your question of how can I maybe help the kids become a little bit more aware of this? It can be as simply as asking them, like, what are you noticing in your body right now? When you're noticing them maybe in a heightened state, bringing them to their body and asking them, what are you noticing? Is it possible to go into allies? Because I know that's part of the nature connection.
Yeah.
And just sit with whatever it is that you're feeling and let that feeling kind of maybe move, get even bigger in your body, to practice playing with edges in that way.
Mm.
And allies definitely helps stay with a sensation that is maybe a little bit more intense than you're used to. It helps you be able to stay with it because it puts you more into that witness mode. I've found over and over sensations that I think are so intense. I expand my vision and all of a sudden there's space around them and I can be with them. Yeah, I can hang out with them. And then they can start to shift a bit and change.
Mm. And there is even witnessing myself for because I think there was a block there that I somehow found space around, which is that I noticed within me healing with others as a teacher with multiple ages. and kind of feeling this sense of shame, like, oh, I'm not supposed to take this from this
Mhm.
situation. I'm not allowed to take. And I don't know why it felt like taking, like it wasn't this reciprocal thing. And maybe it was because I didn't think I was putting out value to get value in
Mm.
return. Which value, God, I could talk about value the rest of the day. And yeah, maybe the value of self and the value of the earth, the value
Mhm.
of relationship and connection to it. Um, that does seem like kind of the line, the edge
Mhm.
between like what we were saying earlier, like the people who do and don't take care of the earth, maybe. Um,
Mhm.
that's the line that we draw. I kind of want to tangent a little bit. I'm curious your story. Like, where did you grow up, and like how old were you maybe when you were like, I think I'm more of a witch than a Christian? How did that happen?
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of a cornfield in Southwest Kansas. My family was part of the Holloman Mennonites. They're the ones where the women wear the black hats and the men, all wear like button-down shirts mostly and pants and have beards, and women wear dresses. And there's at the time there were like no televisions or cameras or any of that sort of technology. There are like cell phones and stuff now, and I'm hearing that that's really changing the culture overall. Um, and Yeah, my parents left the church. My dad was always kind of in and out of the church, kind of a rebel, and he officially, like fully left the church for the final time, at least final so far, when I was 13, and my mom decided to leave the church with him because she wanted to try to save the marriage because divorce is, a high-level sin, and because she wanted us children to have the opportunity to go to high school and college. Within the Mennonite church, the schooling goes to 8th grade. And so when I was 7th grade, I entered public school. And I pretty much just closed the door to everything religion, everything Jesus, everything Christian. Just like if somebody I could hear a quote and I would be like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful. It rings true. And then I would hear it was from the Bible and be like, oh, that's bullshit. Just like automatically, like just dismiss it, like full-fledged the other direction. And that was it was in high school that I started becoming interested in like energy work and healing modalities. And I started exploring that. After college, I took my first, like, no, actually in college, I was studying abroad on the island of Malta my sophomore year. And I did this whole energy work training with a person, and I continued working and going deeper into that modality for several years. And then I got into massage and body work, and I don't know, and then it just kept evolving from there. And then I started finding ritual and the ancestors, and it just kept going deeper and deeper, or further and further, like away from that fundamentalist upbringing. And as far as like when did I start to identify as a witch, I don't even know really, as I don't really identify as a witch even now. I identify as witchy. And to me, that means, earth connected, like somebody who talks to the trees and the waters and the squirrels, which I've done my entire life. Like that was just who I was. I was always just like in conversation with the squirrels and, talking to trees, and trees would talk back to me. Um, but yeah, I don't identify as a witch because to me that still has more of those like pagan root connotations. And I don't have any training or background in paganism, or like formal ritual work in that way. So for me, it's a witchy because that implies that earth connectedness, that implies that animist perspective where you look around and you see the world as alive, and you know that you can relate to many, many more people than just other living human people. And I probably only even started identifying in that way within like the last 5 years. It's been a long journey to actually, again, to claim that for myself, even though I've been doing it for a long time, for decades already.
Why did you feel like it was so challenging to claim?
I think part of it, probably the biggest part of it is still just that kind of like subconscious or unconscious knowing that witches are bad, and that being like that you're going to go to hell if you like practice those things, or you're going to be burned at the stake, just a lot of those more witch wounds that weren't conscious for a long time. And then the more that I worked with my own ancestors and encountered many among them who were healers, who were so deeply connected to the earth, that helped me to feel safe and to like more recognize who I am and what it is that I'm doing and why I'm here and how I serve, and that whole all of that stuff.
What do you mean witch wounds? It just like culturally what we learn about witches being negative.
Well, I guess that would be one piece of it, just kind of it's a bit of a taboo. But even more than that, like if we trace, probably you have, probably most of us have in our lineages people who were persecuted at some point, like during the witch trials, even here in the United States. And then over in Europe before that, there was how many, I'm not a huge history people, but several centuries of persecution of people for being witchy, which could just mean like they were herbalists. They were healing using the plants from the land without even having anything more than that. Or it could just be that they were wealthy women landowners, and so they were called witches so that the land could be taken from them and they could be thrown in jail or killed. And so that lives in our DNA as settlers here from Europe. And that's something that also often that I work with the ancestral healing, is the reclaiming of those gifts and of those abilities to connect in with the earth in those ways, and to know our power to create and to manifest and to bring into the tangible world, our desires. Like that's to me is what a witch is, or what witchy is. And to be able to feel safe doing that, because there's a lot of contraction in the nervous system and within our lines around doing those things, because so many people were killed or harmed for living in those ways.
Yeah, I'm having like my mind is in like a fork in the road right now. It's like which way do we take? Do we take like the corruption in the way we live on land and real estate, or do we take like the ancestor one? And I kind of want to get to both, because a lot of exactly what you're speaking to is like the way power has been abused um to maintain land and money, and whether it was the church or an empire, um like I yeah, they kind of get back to this loop thinking of like, when is the where's the justice, where's the freedom in the way we do this? Like, are we just perpetually going to be taking, and like, how do we fix the situation that I'm in? It's 2023. I'm like, with real estate in Washington, how do we like get policies and models of good communion with native people in place? And because it is the ancestral work that for me even brought me here to do this. It was like watching your map with your like case study with Tad Hargrave. I thought I'll save it. I don't want to get too rabbity, but it had 4 ancestors, and I thought, is there, I guess I wasn't going in my family tree like the one parents, two parents, two parents. I had these 4 ancestors come to me in meditations. Like, it was like an ancestral it was like very intentional, like learning, and then the guided in a field in Kansas one time. And like listening to these 4 archetypes and like being with them in a new way, I think is what led me and still guide me in some ways and now they've kind of brought me back to land, and how it's like there's just like, don't let the humanity of the way you are allowed to live here slip through my fingers. And it's on me now. And I'm just so tired of that being the story of like, because of who you are, you don't get to learn about plants. You don't get to be here and like have the skills and the relationship. And because we have more money and because we have more power and because we have more people and more military, more knowledge, more whatever, we can just take from you at any point, whatever we want. And I don't know how to, I don't know. And yeah, I guess like what I started this conversation with is like, I've kind of stepped out of this matrix and I find myself like with these very real blocks in the real estate world of like, how do I navigate this shit show? Because on paper, the definition, like going back to negotiations and marriage, like it's more than just a piece of paper, it's more than just a contract. Well, the same thing is like it's more than just a piece of paper on who owns the title, and it is that. And how can we weave repair into these systems that are already in place? I don't know. I'm kind of like speaking in circles.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay. Keep speaking.
Sure. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm getting to is I want, I feel like I've become this like corporate businesswoman with a mission for her soul, and I don't know how to like both sustain myself and the world around me. I just don't know.
What's coming to mind for me as you're speaking is that idea of like the sacred question within like nature connection again.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you have your sacred question that you will only find the answer to through living and through continuing to take the next step as it appears before you. And personally, I'm really excited and curious to see where your quest takes you and like where you land and all the steps along the way with all of that, because you have a very unique perspective that is coming from what I'm hearing, like a very deep soul calling, and also a very interesting intersection of interests and skills and abilities, which only, like you were asking me at the beginning, like where does your business come from, how much of your business is you. And I said pretty much 1-to-1.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing the same thing for you too, which I would guess is kind of rare within real estate. I would guess that there's a bit more separation between the person and their work generally within real estate. I could be wrong about that.
Well, and so much of the current system is the commodification of the investment.
Yeah.
And so the whole business is simply turnover for wealth. And on paper, the highest and best use of a plot of land is a profit. By definition, it's its ability to make money. And I've been listening to like old Persian history lately, and so like there is this like human element of like, well, if I'm going to spend my life savings on somewhere where I'm going to live for the rest of my life, I would hope that it would like earn me something so that it would sustain me till I die. Like there is an investment piece to it. And yeah, I can like I said, I could just go off, but yeah, it's who I am. So I don't know how to mirror what I do see in real estate, people who are only in it for the investment. There, a part of me is like, yes, give me some of that. I would like a paycheck, please, and fill up my savings account so I can go buy a farm. Like I really want to do that, and I need to earn money to do that. I would like to adopt a child someday. That takes money and stability, and and I am okay. Yeah, I've had a lot of money shot of work. So, but
Well,
the
I'm
work.
hearing I'm hearing it going back to value. You know, like this, you know, you were talking before about value, and there's many ways. I don't think that we need to value ourselves by money. I think that that's a really toxic and potentially harmful way to value ourselves, like by the amount of money we have on our bank accounts. Like I don't think that there's really any connection between like money and value, money and worth. And I do also, but on the other side, I do think that the more that we value ourselves, the more we are valued in return through things like money and investment potential. And so I'm kind of wondering if that might be an entry point, you know, working with value
Oh,
as an
interesting.
entry point into your questions on
Well,
some of these things that are so tender and strong.
it's been a big theme, value, actually. Yeah. Oh, I lost my train of thought.
Mm,
But oh, equity. Yeah, yeah. Equity, money. Equity is more than money. And in
yeah.
housing, I mean, I that's where there's vision comes from of like, I will build a real estate development that houses people in a way that proves that we can yield more than monetary equity in the way that we live amongst each other.
Mm,
We can build and grow in a way that yields more than just money, more than just community, more than just food, all of that in different interconnected ways that hopefully we do get back to some semblance of our roots. And the question that's kind of been hanging that I'm getting to now is like the going back to your roots and your story and the you said earlier like the unique perspectives that I have, but I feel like you probably come across that a lot in the people that you speak with is like you and a lot of the people that you meet with and work with have walked in more than one world, like multiple worlds and often simultaneously. And I find that to be exhausting. It's a lot of work and it yields beauty, but it's really painful and like, what was that like for you? Do you feel like you have a lot of, because I grew up in rural Missouri, and so I know rural Kansas and like it's quite different than the Pacific Northwest here where I am now. And
yeah.
what's that?
It's yeah, it's an interesting question. I know I'm realizing that in some ways I have a really refined ability to kind of like switch who I am, to like switch the words that I'm saying, the language that I'm using, like even maybe the way that I present myself to fit into different you know, very different groups or communities or yeah. And I'm also realizing that that's like a gift, and also it's not like often doesn't often feel fully authentic. Like it often feels like I'm hiding parts of myself when I'm here and I'm hiding different parts of myself when I'm here. And so, you know, what I'm feeling within myself as you're asking that question is this is it possible to like walk the edge and to be just who I am in both communities and show up, you know, even more and more just in my own authenticity, which again, the more healing that I do, the more comfortable I am with high sensation. It's easier because I'm not judging anyone then. Like I feel like that's a big part of what I'm hiding. If I'm going from one, if I'm in this community, I might be hiding certain judgments that I have of them and not wanting to show parts of me that they might judge. When I'm over here, the same, I might be hiding certain judgments that I have of them and not showing other parts of me that I'm afraid that they would judge. And so the more that I am able again to hold like both and either or within me, light, dark, you know, all of it, and not judge any of it as bad or wrong or good or bad, the more I can just show up as who I am because I'm no longer afraid of them judging me either. Does that answer the question at all?
I put on this black and white shirt and I was like, I have a feeling this like theme of duality will come up of like the black and white, the light and dark. Um, and it sounds like you have walked that journey. You're
Well, I'm still walking it. Oh
whole
my
life.
goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I really I find myself fascinated with edges in general, like where like the forest meets the meadow, or the
Mhm.
trees meet the seaside, or those animals that can kind of like the coyote who can thrive in a city landscape or deep in the woods. I find a an affinity and a kind of like a kinship with those, with like what I call like more edge walkers, or edge areas within the natural ecosystems. And I kind of feel like that's like part of like my role, and the role of a lot of people who I encounter who walk in all these different worlds, is to learn how to be at those edges of different things, and kind of allow them to be these two very different experiences to be reconciled or integrated through our bodies. Like that is part of why we're here. Yeah.
It did when I first emailed you, I mentioned the Nature Connection School in Idaho. Have you taken classes there?
I haven't, but my son is at one of their camps right now as we speak.
Oh, really? It's a
Yes.
Twin Eagles, is that right?
Twin Eagles
Twin
Wilderness
Eagles.
School. Yeah.
Okay, so it has similar lineage to Wilderness Awareness School, and I'm like 2 minutes
Yes.
down the road from Wilderness Awareness School, and that's who I've been studying with the past 2 years. And um, why are edges? I mean, why are they this source of life? And maybe this goes back to like this two sides of the same coin. It's just polarities, opposites. War. Um, is it because why are we? Is it that the middle ground is where the most life is? It seems like as this theme that it's like this part
Yes.
of the curriculum. It seems in these schools because it's like that's where the life is, guys. It's in the in
Yeah.
between space. It's the battlefield between your. That's where you either war or you do something else there.
Are you coming to just like the most amazing harmony, and like just like overflowing of life and prosperity and abundance? I'm thinking of prosperous, like in this moment, I'm thinking of that. Like we have raspberries growing on a fence outside of our house, and there's just so many. I mean, like that kind of prosperity, like just overflowing, and just you can't even like stuff enough in my face or in the freezer to keep up with them.
Yeah.
Like, and that, I mean, yeah, and that's literally an edge between my neighbor's house and my house. It's not truly like an edge within nature, but it is also an edge, and there is life flourishing.
That's beautiful. I think that's someone told me that urban harvesting is the best for that reason. It's just like the hedges and edges between all the little dwellings are typically where a lot of food is found. I
Yeah.
can't going back to equity and like and wealth. Like I have never felt richer than what you're describing. Than like the other day picking off ripe trailing blackberries. Oh my gosh, the flavor.
Yes.
I mean, just like ripe, just one just standing there, like both of my
And
hands
all warm from the sun.
in
Oh,
this, and I was warm in the sun, and I'm like, this
yes.
is wealth. This is primary satisfaction. Like,
Yes. Yes. And I hear that that's what you're wanting to give, make sure that everybody has access to through your housing, like moments like that where it's not so, bringing in the nature connection and the land into housing, so everybody can have. I mean, just like you're talking about that, we're talking about this, and I'm thinking about all the people who have never had that experience.
yeah.
And there are a lot living in the big cities where there aren't just raspberries and blackberry brambles and
And in the, I think in I've driven all over the Midwest, and those itty bitty towns in the middle of hundreds and thousands of acres of farmland, um, where like I went to college for nutrition. I had a lot of health issues. I was a late teenager, and so went to college, and kind of my healing journey began with nutrition and healing my gut. And um and kind of realizing that like some of those little towns in the middle of the breadbasket are just as dependent on the big food systems, and they get the
Yes.
Cisco trucks, and that's what they eat for 3 meals a day is, and like they're here, you are in the middle of all this sunshine, and you're just as devoid from these experiences as the inner cities that are packed with like thousands of people in a square block. And it's like the nature connection deficit
Yeah.
has many landscapes.
Yes. Yes.
and
Absolutely.
and I don't know, and I find myself, my real estate mind goes to the edges of cities as like the places where, these middle ground communities, like 10 acres, 10
Yeah.
houses, like not big, low impact, lots of space, dedicate an acre to growing this, because depending on how it's zoned, maybe you need, certain dwellings for certain, anyway, affordable housing
Yeah.
solutions. There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
um, so,
I'm
okay.
gonna have to be wrapping up here soon.
I was about to ask. Well, I had
Yeah.
that feeling too. I was like, okay, we've been over an hour here. So, is there anything else you would like to share today
Mm.
while we have this?
I just find myself, continuing to think about the edges and how I don't know if I can put this into words. It's a feeling that I'm having about how like when everything we go to that like binary mindset where everything is separated out, which isn't a problem because we live in a world of polarity with like good with like sun and moon, night and day, winter, spring, like some we live, there's a lot of, it's actually what feeds like these opposites. It's actually what feeds and makes and generates life.
Mhm.
And it's when we're like judging them and we're saying this one's bad, this one's right, good, or this one is superior and this one's inferior, that we get into trouble. And so I feel like it's the judgment that actually creates the split. And so when we can drop the judgment and again just let it all like mix and muddle within our bodies and let ourselves feel it all, that's when we have the capacity for like more life to come through us as well. Life in the forms of like being able to like actually love ourselves and others and experience compassion and give compassion, and again with the curiosity and the generosity, like all these things begin to grow within us. And those are all like what I see as like antidotes, very strong antidotes to that pattern of fundamentalism, and also what allows us to like live more into the mystery and to really trust and be in that more place of surrender and to just like letting ourselves be in the high sensation of life.
Mm. Wow, my answer seeking brain was like, what is it about the edge? And that answer just like that's it. That's what
Awesome.
it's all about. Um,
Mm.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad marketing for hippies, it kind of clicked that that's where I first discovered you, was through Tad, me learning through Tad during the embodiment conference. And I think it was, he even shared that. I hosted him during that, and I think he mentioned you. So I would love to speak with you again sometime in the future. And I'm very grateful for this time that we've had today, and that
I
our
would
path.
love it. It has been such a delight to be here. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Larisa. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You
See you
too.
next time.